on the market as well. It's one of my favorite systems out there. I also was the director of online learning at a small private college in the Midwest that had about 11,000 students online. I have worked as a consultant with a lot of different institutions developing online degree programs. So I've done instructional design work, and I'm an associate professor at the University of Oklahoma. So I've kind of been around educational technology from all different angles, from providing it to students, the technology side, teaching, helping facilitate other people teaching. So about 3 years ago, I started using OER textbooks in my courses at the University of Oklahoma. And I teach in business, and so there were a couple of good options out there, but um, I did run into some interesting patterns and trends, and I'll tell you more about those in a second. But I suspect that we're all experiencing some of the same patterns and issues. So we're going to do a little poll. And again, if you're not in gallery mode, you might want to do that right now just so you can see everybody's response. Um, so I don't, why am I not getting it? There we go. Ah, now I can't get my screen to, I have used PowerPoint before, I swear, but I can't get my presentation to advance, and I don't know why. It's like it's stuck between the two. Oh, this is weird. I've never had this happen before. I know this is really ugly, but I think this may be the only way I can do it is in this mode. Sorry, guys. I'll try to make the slide bigger. Um, I don't know what's going on. But I want to take a quick poll. So if you could all just raise your hand either virtually or your actual human hand, you can raise up in your window if you have your camera on. I would love to know how many of you are confident that if you assign a chapter from a textbook, students will read it. How many of you are confident? We got some laughing. Oh no, I don't think that's a yes. Okay. All right. How many of you? So I'm gonna say I don't see any hands going. I don't see a single hand up. I might be missing some folks, but yeah, I don't. Anybody see any hands at all? There's a lot of people in here. Okay. Nobody. All right. So next question is, and that's sad, but I expected that. How many of you suspect that students are going out to websites like Chegg or what have you and are getting test banks or pre-written case study answers? And this may depend on the discipline you're in, but how many of you suspect that that might be happening? I will raise my hand. Okay, so not a ton. Either people aren't raising their hand or aren't watching or but the only thing so I can't really tell. Maybe I'll say how many of you don't think that's happening, and then we can get the opposite. Anybody think that's not happening? Nobody's using case studies or test banks. Everybody's saying it's happening. I think they use AI now instead all the time. Not really applicable, Tiffany says. Yeah, that's possible if you don't use test banks. That's not applicable. But I'm getting the trend, right, that students are utilizing outside resources to complete their homework. And that was kind of the next question. You guys already answered it. How many of you suspect that students are using AI to generate responses in papers, assignments, projects, and written discussions? How many of you suspect that's going on? Yeah, I'm seeing an awful lot of hands up. Unfortunately, like this is not a surprise, right? We know this is happening. It's teaching in the last few years has changed pretty drastically for the colleagues that I'm talking to. Let's see, not all students. Yes, I agree. Some students you can tell. I actually have a colleague at OU who says he's really happy when he sees a poorly written assignment because he knows that they have not used AI. And so it's a different way to look at things, right? But at least you know they're trying, right? Okay. Um, Last question. And this is a little different. Yeah, bring on a misspelling. I agree, Brian. Yeah. Um, how many of you struggle to keep your course updated with current, fresh content? So, dealing with, new test banks, new videos, new cases, new websites, and new technology. Anybody feel that that's a struggle or not so much? Or maybe a better question to ask is how many of you are trying to keep your content updated more often because of AI and test banks and things like that online? I'm seeing some thumbs up on that too. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, again, I would say that if you're a faculty member, you don't have a lot of time to do that. Um, And it seems to be an increasing need, right, for us to continually adapt our content because the world's kind of blown up in the last few years with AI and what it's doing to teaching and learning. And there's an awful lot of impacts for that. That's not what I'm going to focus on. I'm just going to focus in a very application-oriented concept of how I'm trying to combat that in my class and some of the things that I did initially, steps that led up to this new approach that I've got going on now. All right. So, again, what I did in my class when I integrated OER is went out and pulled the content. And, again, I gave you my background just because, I mean, I don't want to brag, but I've been doing instructional design and e-learning development for over 2 decades, and I found it extremely time consuming to integrate an OER textbook in my classroom. The other problem that I found was that every OER resource had a different set of resources. So some of the OER texts I found was just a textbook. Some had quiz banks, some had videos and cases, and some had course cartridges, right? You could pull that course cartridge into Blackboard or Canvas or D2L, whatever system you're using. Well, I did choose the course cartridge option, and it really took me a long time to reintegrate that back into my existing Canvas course. So that was one issue that I had. Another issue that I had was I started noticing that after I implemented the OER textbook, my students I guess I'm mean, but I had quiz questions that were between like 35 and 45 questions for each chapter, thinking that that would help them engage, right? If there was a quiz, they would, hopefully read so that they could pass these quiz questions each week. And the students were doing great on the quizzes. They were getting like 95, 100%. I mean, they were doing better than me when I took the quizzes. I'm not kidding. And I was like, wow, these guys are on top of things. But in my discussions, either in video calls, I teach mostly online, or in written discussions, there was nary a citation, no concepts, no integration of what was in the textbook. And I kept thinking, how can they be doing so good on the quizzes and know all these concepts, but it's not infiltrating anything else in the teaching and learning environment? So I kind of suspected, right? And this is, pre-AI. This is not an AI issue, but I Googled my OER textbook and found that you could buy the entire set of test banks for, $10 to $15. And I think that was happening. Maybe you didn't even have to buy them if you went to AI. I don't know. But I Googled them and that's what I found. So I started to do a little bit of research and experimentation. Um, so I'll tell you a little bit about that. But I forgot to mention you all what we are all experiencing when I was doing those polls, that's pretty well replicated in research. On the screen, you see there's a research study that I found, and this is an old study, right? So from 1961 to 2000, full-time students, right? Assuming you went to school full-time as an undergraduate, you're supposed to spend 40 hours a week if you base everything off the Carnegie, credit hour, right? But they found that between 1961 and 2000, the amount of time that students studied went from 40 hours a week to 27 hours a week. So that's a huge decline. That's before AI and even before the internet was really, changing and impacting all of our learning. Now, I teach mostly adult students and they're maybe part-time, so they have 20 hours a week, but I know that my students are not full-time students. They have jobs, they have children. So I think I would suspect that that decline has continued. So, gosh, if you have students who are not spending time on their studies, and we know they're not reading, right? We all raised our hands pretty confidently. How are they going to get that foundational information? How are they going to get the information that they need to come back into the class? I'm a big fan of Moore's model, right? Of interaction in a classroom, which is you interact as a student with your content, with your faculty, and with other students in the class. Well, if you never interact with the content, how are you going to interact with your teacher and discuss them and apply them and ask questions? You're not. Another research study, and all my sources are in the notes of the PowerPoint presentation, noted that they think that only 20 to 30% of undergraduates complete assigned readings. I mean, that's atrocious, right? That's not even an F if you're grading on an F scale. So we have a real problem, right, with engaging our learners. And then in another study, students completed only 27% of readings before class. So again, when you come to class, I think the lack of reading is almost pushing faculty into trying to cover all that material in lecture. And lecture we know is not effective, right? It's not an effective way for people to learn and listen and hear, right? So these are some of the problems that I encountered in my course. You all kind of reiterated you're encountering some of these issues, and research supports the fact that these are issues in our classes. So it can sound like, woe is me, what are we going to do? But I think there's some really exciting opportunities with what's happening with AI. And OER is a great foundation to work with, in my opinion. It's not probably enough, but it's certainly a really good option that where we can do something new that we haven't been able to do with our teaching curriculums in the past. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So I started to do some experiments, right? And one of the things that I did with those quizzes that everyone was getting like 95 or 100% was every term I'd start rewriting, 5 to 10 questions per chapter. It took me a long time, a long time to do that. And it was also not good for students, right? They bombed. Their grades started to plummet. So, I mean, I think I was sort of I think I was preventing cheating a little bit, but I wasn't promoting learning. And I want to prevent cheating, but more so, I want to promote learning. Like I want to engage with my students again about course concepts. That's what's fun, right? When you teach. I see some nodding heads, right? So yeah, I don't want students to cheat, but more importantly, I want them to learn. That's my goal. So one of the other things I tried out was I was just looking for, I mean, I'm kind of older, right? And I know people love TikTok and Instagram and everything. And I thought, well, what could I use? Like maybe some videos. So I'm lucky. I teach at the University of Oklahoma, and we have free LinkedIn Learning accounts for all students. So I started to integrate LinkedIn Learning videos into my courses. And the thing that I liked about LinkedIn Learning was that they would watch a segment of the video and then answer some questions, and then watch more video and then answer more questions. And they didn't get a certificate of completion until they had watched the whole video and answered all the questions. And lo and behold, the discussions did start to improve, and students started to report in informal discussions with me and on their student reviews that they really liked those videos, which kind of got me to thinking like, I think students do want to learn, but I do think we're going to have to kind of take them further down the path of like requiring them to learn. And I think once they get into it, they realize learning is not that bad. It's actually kind of fun, you know? But I don't know that the models that we have been using traditionally for a long time are going to work with all of these tech tools that students now have at their hands to create what I call academic integrity shortcuts, right? So I think we kind of give students disjointed tasks, like go read this textbook and then, go answer this discussion question and then take a quiz. And I know in instructional design, we're always like, use mastery quizzes and students will come back and retake the quizzes to learn, but they don't, right? Once they get good enough grade, they quit, right? The students that are really invested in their learning tend to do it. But the B, the C, the D students, I don't ever see them coming back to do mastery quizzes. And I think it's a time thing, and I think it's just a disjointed situation, right? I already read the book. I didn't do well on the quiz. Are you going to go back and reread that book? And the answer is like in our dreams, but not in reality, right? So those are some of the things that kind of led me to start, kind of thinking, what can I do with this OER textbook to make it more engaging and more fun for students, kind of based on some of what I learned from LinkedIn and getting students more engaged using video. So the next thing I did was I started thinking through kind of, what I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to build content that was designed for more active processing. So again, if you've worked with an instructional designer, they're always talking about chunking, right? You want to put together information in short bits. And I'm looking around the world and I'm seeing TikTok and Instagram. These are short bits of information. They may not be enough for super deep learning, but this is what people are used to engaging with, is short, active processing. Watch a video, try something out. So I think that one of the goals I was going for was to get assessment and application to be more proximal to each other, embedded within each other. And you see this a lot in corporate training. And this is just sort of my own anecdote or my own saying. And I always, it's like the field of dreams, but in the opposite. If you don't assess it, students won't do it. And I believe that's really true. And I'm not saying they're lazy. I'm saying they're pragmatic. My students are adult learners and they're busy, and I get it. If I were a student and I was really busy and I had to pick between making my kid a dinner and doing a practice exam, I'm not going to do the practice exam. I get it. So I think we have to think about, how do we make sure that everything we do is assessed, and is it valid and meaningful assessment? And then content can't be static. We need to make it fluid and dynamic. And that's a real challenge for us, right? With the content that we have, it's from textbook publishers or OER content. My first OER book was written in 2018, and it's a business ethics textbook. It didn't even mention the words AI. It didn't even exist when it was written. There are laws that have come into play. The pandemic happened, and hybrid and remote working happened, and privacy issues. All these things have happened since 2018, but that book was, nothing's changed. It's still, so, I can plug in a bunch of readings and try to put more content in there for students, but is that going to help? They don't even read, the original reading assignments, I don't think. So yeah, I see some really great comments, and I'm sorry I'm jamming through this. I think we'll have time for some discussion at the end, but I want to make sure I get to the actual demo part because that's the fun part. But, there's some research behind this too, right? And Heft found that graded reading journals and quizzes will increase reading compliance. So that whole concept of quizzing over reading material isn't a bad one. I just think it needs to be, like I said, again, a little bit more proximal, a little bit more modern and interactive, the way that students are used to. And then Klump, Bauer, and Bradley found that student engagement with readings increased from 27% before class to 70% prior to an assessment. So that goes back to my point of, like, if you're assessing it, like, it's the question we all hate, is this on the test? But if we assess it, they will, engage with it more. So I think those are some of the concepts and principles I was thinking about in terms of creating a new way of students engaging with material. And again, my whole goal is just to give them a good solid foundation so that they can apply their learning to scenarios or in discussions in class, right? So that is what we were going for with this stream technology. And I wanted it to be incredibly simple for faculty and students to use. It's just all web-based hyperlinks that are all browser-based. Time saving for faculty, because I know we all have a lot of pressures on us. So it's literally a simple link that you can put in your class. And the refreshes of content that I'm planning for each textbook or interactive reading assignment, that will automatically be reflected in your class from term to term. And then we want it to be resistant to AI. Of course, I'm not going to say it's, AI proof. I don't think that today I could say that about anything without it being false tomorrow. But we want it to be engaging, fun, application oriented. And then, I think with AI, you still always have to have, right? The way I've kind of approached this is OER materials are the foundation. uh, AI kind of supercharges or refreshes that content, and then there's always human judgment and review before students see the content. So that's kind of the model or the hierarchy that I've used to create content. All right. Let's see, is there anything else I missed that I wanted to tell you about? Yeah. So basically in this model, materials presented in short concepts, bits of material with some kind of application-oriented question or scenario for each key concept. There's videos, there's audio if they like to listen to their textbook. I know students love podcasts. And then there's, interaction and really rich graphics. I find the research about how much our brains process graphics better than text is really compelling. And our brains continue to process graphics even after we don't see them on the screen anymore. So we have used a lot of graphics in the process of developing the content as well. So again, students are going to read, think, and apply. The engagement, the assessment is built right into the interactive reading assignment. And like LinkedIn, they get a certificate at the end. They cannot complete the assignment and submit it for a grade until they've completed all the questions in it. So it's kind of a required interaction with the content. Okay, so I think without further ado, I will show you what it looks like. And then at the end, and in the PowerPoint, I have put in some prompts and the tools and the different software that I've used to create this. So if you want to try it out on your own, you can. So let me pop over here. So again, it's just a one link. The way I've set it up, it's just one link. But I'll click on it, but I already have this window open. So I would open up a book, and this is like if you already use a Vital Source bookshelf or Pearson or one of the publishers, they often will give you links to the chapters. So here's all the chapters in a book, and the student just clicks on the link and it opens in a web page. So it's real simple to access. And I'm going to go in as a student just so you can get a sense of it. And then I'm going to switch over into the editing mode just because it will take me too long. Well, I'll show you in a second. But you can see over here on the left side here, it gives you kind of a meter and shows the student where they are in the textbook. So I've already completed a lot of items. And you can also see, except for it's hidden down here, that you can turn on the audio. So I'll play that for a second. I think everybody should be able to hear it, I hope.
Lesson 1. Ethics, integrity, and professional responsibility. Professional ethics begins with the standards you use when decisions affect customers, coworkers, suppliers, investors, communities, and the environment.
So they can speed it up if they want to. I know some students like to do that. I don't, but they can. Everything in this system is all accessible. So all graphics have alt tags, all narration has a transcript. The contrast and all that good stuff has been accounted for in this system. But basically we took the OER concepts and some of them are the same, but a lot of the OER objectives we elevated using Bloom's taxonomy. So you'll see kind of in some of the early ones, they're pretty basic. But as you get into deeper levels of this chapter, we move into, analysis and evaluation versus just define or list or describe. And that was another thing I found with the OER textbooks. And again, I'm sorry, I'm a little instructional design nerdy, but um, some of them didn't even have learning objectives. They just had like questions. And so that's a little frustrating for me because I just think you should always tie what you're assessing back to an objective. But this is kind of the guts, some of the guts of how we built this. So each lesson again has you can see I've got a continue button down here and here's some of the graphics, but it's just key concepts with definitions bolded for them. And then real world examples. And this is, again, this book was written in 2018. So anything you see here from the Federal Trade Commission was our ability to update and refresh this content. And it literally takes minutes to update the whole chapter. It's amazing. So it's talking about a new rule on FTC fake reviews. So I like this because it's all still based on that OER textbook, which I still assign in my class. But it's got updated cases, updated laws, updated current events. Um, I hope I didn't already tell this story, but one of the examples in my textbook is on Patagonia and how they started a nonprofit. They diverted all their profit from Patagonia into this nonprofit division. And the textbook says what a great example this is of a sustainable CSR ethical company. But in reality, it was a very not great decision. And Patagonia is really struggling and having to lay off employees 6 years later. The textbook isn't being updated though, right? It still says that's a good example, but it may not be. So that's why I get excited about this, just because it's fun to get the content more updated. So I've already taken some of these, and you can see the correct answers, but I'll show you for each knowledge check, there's usually some graphics, there's some sort of a real world question or example, and then just short questions. And some of them are just simple, multiple choice. Some of them are sorting, like they're sorting maybe some different ethical concepts into, different decisions that you make in the workplace. But I'll scroll down to a couple that I haven't completed yet. So this is a section on goodwill, reputation, and profit. So I can continue, but you'll start to notice that I can complete this content first. So as the learner, I can't move forward. I can't get to the part that says I've completed this until I answer all the questions. It's kind of keeping me engaged with the content. So if I answer this incorrectly, it gives me feedback and I can retry. Then some students, I told you, I can't make this AI resistant, and I also can't force a student to learn, but I am at least going to force them to read a question and think about things a few times and give them some feedback. So, they have to retry until they get this answer correct. And they'll get feedback until they do. Now I can hit the continue button and keep moving through the rest of the system. So again, it's very application oriented. I have used this in mostly business courses, but I've built an astronomy course with a colleague and a chemistry course. And it was the same thing, like the chemistry of, how iPhones get recycled. And it was very current events, very current examples so that students could take these chemistry concepts and apply them to something that already was happening in their life, in their world, that was sort of authentic and accessible as an example. I'm going to show you a couple more things, and then I know there's some comments. I'd love to get into those. But I am going to switch to the author mode just so I can switch down to a couple other aspects of the tool that I'm using, the platform that I'm using, and some of the cooler features that I think it has to help students engage with content, but in an asynchronous manner. So this is a knowledge check, but it's a discussion question. So I typed in an answer just for time's sake, and the system will analyze the student's answer. So they had to identify stakeholders, but they didn't my answer wasn't quite accurate. So it can analyze written text very well. I've tried this in many different scenarios. It's kind of uncanny how well, I mean, I remember 10 or 20 years ago, we were like, wouldn't it be great if something could auto grade discussion questions or short essays? This can, and it's very good at grading, and you can tell it how to answer and give it a lot of guidance. So anyways, that's just one example. I can try that again and and then it'll give me feedback if I get it correct. Um, there's also at the very end some application activities where it basically goes through and kind of instead of asking questions just about these specific pieces of knowledge, it kind of integrates everything you learned, all the course objectives throughout the lesson into these final application activities. And then at the very end, you've got your references. So you can see all of these updated references that, again, that's not something my students would get in their course textbook or even in the course unless I went out and found all these and gave them all of these individual links. So saved me tons of time and I think gave students a much more accurate, up-to-date chapter and information to study for this week. And the last thing I wanted to show you, and hopefully you guys will be able to hear it, is there are, well, I missed one of them. Here, I'll show you another. This is not a AI driven. This is just a branching scenario. And I don't know if any of you have ever tried using like Rise or Captivate, but branching scenarios take forever to build. And using this prompting system, you can literally create branching scenarios, simple ones, in seconds. It's crazy. I showed an instructional designer who does a lot of corporate development, and she could not believe this, but basically the students are learning about 3 different ethical lenses through text, through graphics, and then it's not asking them a right or wrong, it's asking them to think, how would you answer? And how does what you answer relate to these 3 ethical lenses? So you can answer these questions and it'll tell you, you know, how your responses sort of line up from, are you a, you know, more focused on deontology? Are you a utilitarian thinker or values-based ethical thinker? So it doesn't always have to be like an assessment. Sometimes it can just help them think and process information in the chapter. So that's just straight, you know, branching scenario. There's a right or wrong answer. They can redo it, but it's not like interactive as much as what I'm about to show you. So in this last little element, sometimes it glitches at the beginning because I've got my mic on Zoom, but hopefully it'll work.
Welcome to the reflection session. What concept from chapter 1 stood out most to you and why did it resonate?
I think just the concept that having one ethical standard for all situations isn't always the best approach in business ethics.
That's an interesting point to consider. In what way do you think having a strictly consistent standard might fall short?
Well, I think it just made me think about how different cultures or, you know, we talked a little bit about global organizations. They may just have a different set of ethical values that I'm used to. And if I'm going to work with suppliers or, you know, other organizations or even other divisions of my company, I need to be more aware of how other people might be approaching an ethical question.
That makes sense. Understanding cultural differences is crucial for global business. Can you think of a specific scenario, maybe in the news or from past experience, where that awareness would have been particularly helpful?
So she'll go through and ask me a couple of little prompts. And then if I just try to blow it off and I'm like, this is stupid, it won't give me my certificate. Like, you do need to engage in it in some sort of a meaningful manner. It's not necessarily, you know, super scrutinous, like it's not going to say that's a bad answer, but it will try to tease out if you give really poor answers or you don't give enough information. It will ask you follow-up questions, which is pretty cool. So again, I don't want this to replace, you know, engagement with me or engagement with classmates in discussions, but I just think, again, it's a way to kind of lead the students up to the, the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I think this will help them, embed opportunities to think, to test their learning, to test their understanding. One of the things that I've heard students say about AI interactions is that they like it because they don't feel it's so judgmental. They feel like it's lower stakes. Like I've had students do practice speeches with AI and they loved it. I've tried peer review. It doesn't work well. They're just like, it's great. I'm like, you can't just tell everybody that their speeches are great. Peer review means you help them learn, right? But AI will tell them, and somehow it doesn't feel offensive, it doesn't feel threatening, right? Because it's a machine, it's not a human being. So I think there's some value in helping people process their thoughts and do some metacognition, even with AI. So that's about it. I just wanted to show you one more thing, and that's related to like, how do I grade with this? And again, I just wanted this to be simple. No LTIs. I've used LTIs forever. They work sometimes. And we're talking about learning tool interoperability, where it passes grades from one system to the other in your learning management system and an external tool. It doesn't always work. And when it doesn't, it's a black box. You can't figure it out. So it's super simple. At the end, they literally get a certificate. It looks just like this. And they upload it into my Canvas as a complete incomplete assignment. It has their name, the date that they completed, and this part's so cool. I'll tell you a story from real life. It's got that QR code on it. So if I snap that QR code, it gives each student and certificate a unique code that it auto generates for them in real time. And I can click that QR code and see that that's a valid certificate. Because what started happening with LinkedIn Learning is that they figured out how to put their last certificate into AI, and it just started generating fake certificates. Little stinkers. So I really like this model because they might be able to figure out how to get around it, but if I have any suspicions, I snap that QR code, it takes me right into Mindsmith and tells me if it's a valid certificate or not. I think that's pretty cool. So okay, so I think I've talked a lot. I'm sorry, a lot, but love to just talk through. Oh, wait, there's a little bit more. And some of this is just information that you can kind of look at on your own. But I didn't just want to tell you about this. I wanted to share with you what software and prompts that I have used to create this. So honestly, you couldn't create a whole course with the systems, but you can use either ChatGPT or Copilot or Claude, whoever your favorite AI system is. And then the system that I load that into is called mindsmith.ai. And this is all in the PowerPoint. And you can do several free lessons in Mindsmith at no charge. You can offer it to your students, unlimited number of students, no charge. So this is something you could maybe, I kind of thought, what would I do if I wanted to try this out? I would pick a couple of key assignments that you want to utilize in your course and identify the OER. And that can be OER chapters from several different OER textbooks, as long as they have the right license. It has to be the open adaptable version, not a non-commercial or not share alike. You can also use your own content. So I have taken my own notes, my own chapters, videos, transcripts, and dumped it into AI and had it generate a new lesson or chapter based on everything that I put in it. So then you put the content into your favorite LLM, add the prompt, which I've got in the notes for you of the PowerPoint. And then, of course, you got to review it, right? And sometimes when you're starting, you do have to kind of massage your prompt a few times until you get it to work. But I gave you some sample prompts that I actually use with pretty consistent output. And then you load the document. So I basically have ChatGPT create what I call a mode A and a mode B document. Mode A is what I load into Mindsmith, and that's the document that's written for students. Mode A identifies every update that it made. So did it change something, add a resource, and it's all color coded. So I can go through as a human being and quickly see what's changed out of the original OER content or documents that I submitted. And then I can review that and make tweaks if I want before I put it into the Mindsmith system and then test it. Then you do what I did. You go through and you answer the questions, and you take the knowledge checks and you rearrange it. You make sure that the content's appropriate. It matches up to the learning objectives, all that good stuff. Then you literally can put that link into your course, have them submit the certificate as if it's an assignment, and you are off and running. All right, so now I will stop talking, and I'd love to hear thoughts, questions. I'm seeing some questions. I can start reading them, but I'd love it if everybody just pops off of their mic and talks. Any questions? Thoughts? Come on, don't be shy. I just talked forever. You guys can do it.
Hi, I have a quick question.
Great.
I was wondering, so I played a little bit with this software before, and I was wondering if you could speak more about how you were able to like take one thing and apply it to the software, like take one book and apply it to the software. Like, how did you add your content to the software? Like, how did that work out for you? How did you break it up?
Yeah,
Does it walk you through that process?
yeah, into Mindsmith, you mean? How did I get Mindsmith to behave
Yes.
the way I wanted it to?
Yes. Sorry, it wasn't very coherent. Thank you.
No, no, I know exactly what you meant. So Mindsmith has several different options. You can take a document, put it into Mindsmith, and have it totally recreate it. I don't like to do that. It's just so much review. You kind of have to reread and re-review everything. Mindsmith has another option where it stays pretty true to your document, and then a third option where it takes your exact wording and makes the content based on your exact wording. And that's the option that I use. So I do all of my prompting and massaging of content in another LLM, because Mindsmith has credits, and so I don't want to use them up. Well, they all do. They all charge you, right? So I have my prompting kind of methodology in ChatGPT. I get everything perfected in ChatGPT, then I dump it into Mindsmith until it don't change anything. So I kind of review my Word docs first and then dump it into Mindsmith. So ChatGPT updates my objectives. ChatGPT takes multiple choice questions. Now, it doesn't always work, right? So ChatGPT, I've told it, I don't want all multiple choice questions, right? I want sorting activities. I want discussion questions. I want branching scenarios. ChatGPT mostly writes multiple choice questions. It can't quite get past it. It sometimes does. But Mindsmith is amazing. So it will literally, when I dump my document in from ChatGPT, it'll say, I've noticed that you've said you don't want all multiple choice. So would you like me to rearrange some questions, or do you want to do that later? So you can either dump in the multiple choice question, then select that tile in Mindsmith where there is a multiple choice question and tell it, I want a branching scenario, and it'll do it for you. Or you can say, make a, so this whole model, just to get back to this key concept and real world application, that is all what I put into a prompt for ChatGPT. And I told it how I wanted to structure each chapter in the textbook. And then there's a third step, which I didn't talk about, which is creating graphics. So I go back into ChatGPT after I get my new chapter written, and I ask it to make graphics for me. So here's like a graphic that I have in the OER content. It's not too compelling. So I asked AI to update it, write a really good alt text for me. And it did. It just gives you a lot more context because it's looking at the whole chapter and what was written out in that chapter. And it just does infographics galore. And I think these will resonate with students. Like, I feel like I can look at a lot of these graphics and glean a lot of good information out of them quickly, which is what students want to do. They want to get this information quickly. So Mindsmith, yes, you can do several different options. You can kind of massage the content outside of the system, like especially if you already have course notes that you want to put into Mindsmith and you don't want it to change it, you just tell it when you create your first lesson, you tell it, I don't want you to change the content.
Can you please repost your link to your illustrations? Because those of us that came in a few minutes late didn't get it.
Yeah, I sure will. And if you look in the notes, all of my steps are listed out in here for you. It's not very pretty, but this is the whole step on how I build in LLM, put it into Mindsmith, and review, publish, and improve. So you should be able to do everything that I listed in this model for free using your free version of an LLM and the free version of Mindsmith AI.
Thank you, Linda. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So in that part of the interactive part that the student talk to the AI, kind of like guidance, is that something that is integrated in Mindsmith, or is something that is an API that you have to purchase or you have to link?
No, it's all integrated. Mindsmith has branching scenarios, the short answer discussions that can be auto-graded, forms, discussions. It's created these great little case scenarios where it'll give the student a scenario, like it's the coworker at work and it's asking a question about posting, an image of a new product launch ahead of the launch deadline, and you can have like a whole discussion based on an ethical concept. It's a lot. I wish I'd shown you that one, but it's a lot of, I mean, I find it fun, and it does actually get me to think like, oh, I didn't think about that. So I think students would enjoy that.
Yeah, I think that is an interesting tool. And my a follow-up question with that is, is there a way that we can monitor what type of like responses AI give to the student so it doesn't go out of context?
Yes, yes. So there are analytics in Mindsmith that show you what each student submitted in their answers, how it was graded, how long it took them to complete the activities. So I know I couldn't fit it all into this session, but there are some really good analytics that you could look at in your class to see how they're doing. And one last thing I will tell you, I mean, again, you can do all of this for free. I think Mindsmith gives you up to 5 lessons for free. I'm looking to create more of these OER textbooks. So I've already created a few in business ethics, business management, astronomy. But if you're interested in co-authoring a book, I'd love to hear from you. I'm really looking for folks that are interested in developing OER textbooks for science, humanities, social sciences. Those are areas which I can't be an editor on this. I don't have any subject matter expertise in those areas. So reach out to me. That's my email. I'd love to hear from you.
Linda, can you share the link to the slides again in the chat?
Yeah, let me do that right now before I forget. I'm seeing some good questions. Please reach out to me. I mean, I'm happy to answer questions. I know everybody has to run to their next session, right? I think we're at time, but please, I'll put those links in the slide in the chat, and then reach out to me anytime if you try it out and you just want to brainstorm with me on one of your lessons, or you want to work with me on one of these texts, I'd be happy to. Sorry I couldn't get to all your questions, but great questions, and it was a lot of fun to talk to y'all today.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Linda. It was a great way to end our first day. However, we do still have a bunch of presentations tomorrow with our keynote, so we hope to see you all tomorrow morning. I know it's a Saturday, but it'll be well worth your time. So we will see you all then, and I'm going to end this meeting.
Oh,
Bye, everybody.
can
Oh,
you leave it open for just a
yep,
second?
for just,
So
yep,
that
for sure.
I'm still trying to
Uh-huh.
get the right version of my
Yep.
slides here for everybody. Sorry. Let's see here. Let's see here. Okay. There you go. Hopefully everybody can get that downloaded in a second or two. And here's my email, lindap@ou.edu. So feel free to reach out. Did it come through to the, yeah, I see
It
it.
did. Yeah, I'm just giving it a second for people to download it if they need it.
Thank
Also,
you.
these recordings will be there too. I'm not sure about all the links, but immediately the recordings populate. But the links we'll have to try to upload later for people.
Yeah. And if people email me, lindap@ou.edu, I can email them the PowerPoint too. I'm sorry, I tried to figure out how to upload it in